Full disclosure, X. Why the X? Uh, Good question. This is not the regular full disclosure, and it didn't feel right calling it something else since this is going to be a big video, and it's not the usual numbered ones that I do on Monday every week. It's not really focused on wrestling, though wrestling is definitely a part of it. And as soon as I thought of the name Full Disclosure X, I will be honest. I'm going to be completely honest and very vulnerable in this video. And when I thought Full Disclosure X, immediately in my chest I went like, dude, it just seems very inflammatory and potentially dangerous, um, problematic. Should I feel okay about calling something X, a la Malcolm X, especially in these kind of times, right? All the more reason. It scares me to do it, so I'm going to do it. And I made sure, at least, this one just wanted to be near me, even though she's very tired. So I said cool, and kids wanted to be here. So I'm cool with that too. I'm going to do my best to not swear, but it's probably going to happen because
Don't worry, I'll probably be fully asleep by
goofball. So there's going to be a number of topics covered in this. There's going to be some hope in this. And there's going to be stuff that bothers me in this. And it would seem remiss to not try to tackle as many of these issues as I can. I'm going to be as open with them as I can. I'm going to be as nuanced. I'm not going to shy away from difficult questions and that kind of thing. I am going to call people by name. I am going to cite examples. These are my opinions. And people normally say that as a way of distancing themselves, right? So these are my opinions, just know that, la 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 la. I don't say that to distance myself. I say that to further engage and further put myself at risk. These are my opinions. And this is what I think. And this is what I feel. And I've talked to a number of friends about this whole thing. And the advice has ranged from, yeah, go ahead and do it, mostly because I think they want to see me do it. And also on the realm of be very careful. Be very careful. There's always this feeling of fear, this kind of beautiful fear that friends would have for me that I wouldn't somehow injure myself, injure my reputation, invite conflicts that I'm currently not engaged in through saying certain things about hot button topics like race, Black Lives Matter, um, the sort of all lives matter. There's a bunch of stuff going on. Today is June 12th, 2016, which is, I mean, it's the anniversary of it. And that's when Pulse nightclub happened. Um, right up the street from her school, um, which really intertwined with my life as well, because it was the covering of that story, the year anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting, that led to me not being at the magazine where I worked, because they got mad that I went and covered that story kind of on my own without approval. And so all of this stuff is kind of twisted in together. And I've just seen so many things come out lately that I wanted to kind of tie them together in a loose way. And because I'm so involved in the wrestling community, particularly in Georgia, but also in Florida, I'm seeing a lot of stuff pop up there. And I just wanted to throw my voice in there because that's what I do. Um, I'm going to start with this. This is going to sound like a really strange place to start. And the overall theme that I want people to keep in mind when I'm talking about it is the theme of fear. Because I think almost all the decisions that people are making are born out of fear. And while that isn't necessarily a bad thing in and of itself, I think if people can find that in the ways that find the ways that fear is guiding their decisions and their thoughts, that it may give them a different perspective. And this goes for just about everybody. Ray Ciccarelli, is that him? The NASCAR driver who, when NASCAR sort of put out there that we're not going to be flying Confederate flags anymore and that kind of thing, the response was predictable from all sides. And then Ray Ciccarelli, who's a driver. I'm going to be talking about the Bubba Wallace stuff in context with the Paulie stuff that I'm going to bring up pretty soon. So, but Ray Ciccarelli was a guy who's like, if they're not going to allow that flag anymore, then I'm not going to be part of NASCAR anymore. And so the piling on began, right? And I'll be honest, I enjoyed it. I thought it was really funny because Ray was somebody who hadn't had a prominent career. He never won a pole position. He never won a race. And so people started piling on, right? Oh, they're still going to fly a Confederate flag. Don't worry, Ray. And then they would show the white flag, right? Because the South surrendered in the Civil War. And all these other things, culminating with my favorite, the thing I thought was the funniest, which was Ray has never been good at any kind of race-related matter. Right? My kid ever heard that before. Really funny. And I have something about me that I'm just going to put out there. And it doesn't matter almost no matter what it is. If I see piranhas swarming around something, my first instinct is to feel bad for the cow. It doesn't matter if the piranha are justified. If I see a group of people attacking somebody, my instinct is to feel sympathy and empathy for that single person and try to ascertain what's going on. That might upset people. Steve, how can you not just see the Ray thing as a cut and dry thing? He was this loser scrub who drove some races for NASCAR and he never won. And him, making this grand statement of stepping away because they're not going to have a Confederate flag. He's wrong for feeling that way. And we should be able to mock him to our heart's content. And he wasn't even a winner anyway. And look at this response that NASCAR had. And it was very funny and really clever. Most people can kind of get behind it. But here's what it made me think of once I went with that instinct of feeling bad for the bleeding cow and when I see the piranha going is I'm like, what does this remind me of? Sort of this, the merit of his argument is less important than the fact we're going to reduce the strength of his conviction by saying he wasn't good at the thing that he was supposed to be good at. By the way, I would just assume that if you got to drive on a NASCAR track in any way, shape, or form, that there's a level of proficiency there that people don't have. The average Joe Blow from Tupelo does not have, right? So that's, but you know what it reminded me of? Ready? Colin Kaepernick, who is now a hero. Now Amnesty International is giving awards to. Now people are praising as the guy who sort of kicked this thing off when he knelt during the national anthem at NFL games. It sparked a great deal of controversy. And you know how he was attacked? This is just a stunt. Same as the Ray stuff. It's the same. He hadn't made the playoffs in a while. He's not a top flight elite level quarterback, etc., etc., etc. You question the sincerity of it by saying, well, if he was a prominent star, he wouldn't be doing this. This is only to get attention, right? If he wasn't a prominent star, it's irrelevant what he's doing because he wasn't as big of a star. We're gonna mock him for that. It's the same thing that they did to Kaepernick, right? And when it was done to Kaepernick, it wasn't a good thing and it wasn't a positive thing. Yeah. Hey, sorry, I stopped it temporarily because she was upset because she kept yawning. So I turned around and told her to stop yawning, and so she got upset. And so I stopped it because I wanted to talk to her, and I realized like, oh, I should apologize to you here. You can't help yawning, right? You're tired, and I'm just happy that you wanted to be a part of it. So I'm sorry to you, okay? I'm sorry. Being able to admit fault is a difficult thing to do. And there are certainly a lot of people whose attitude about Colin Kaepernick at one point was shut up and play. Oh yeah. And that's been our attitude. Shut up and dribble, shut up and play. Who cares what celebrities think anyway? Why should they chime in? Why should their opinion count more than other people's? It shouldn't. But they're people. And they do have platforms. And do I think Ray Ciccarelli's overall stance of no Confederate flags or something really wrong with that is correct? I don't share his opinions, no. But the stand that he's taking, I'm not just going to dismiss it out of hand any more than I would have dismissed Colin Kaepernick's out of hand. He probably feels true in his convictions. That's not right, and I don't want to be part of it. And the way that the piranhas are going after him is very similar to how a different group of piranhas went after Colin Kaepernick. And what have we found later? That now Colin Kaepernick is seen as the forerunner of a lot of things that are going on right now. Will Ray be seen the same way? Likely not. At the same time, what's interesting to me about all of those things is the very human instinct to tribe up and attack people where they're the most vulnerable. And it's one of those things about being a human being that you have to address and you have to come to grips with. We have a thing where we want to fight and we want to hurt and we want to destroy. That's something that lives within people. And we're seeing it manifest itself all over the place. I watched the Dave Chappelle thing, and it's fantastic. It's very raw, but he says something close to the end that really struck me, which is like, this is the last place of civil discourse, meaning that concert where people were socially distanced and that kind of thing. And he kept throwing it out to the audience, like, you're the young people. I'm happy to be driven around and have you take the wheel, meaning it's a young person's thing going on, and he's right for the most part. And he's also right about civil discourse. So one of the things that I would call for is civil discourse. And I'm here to tell you it cannot happen on Facebook. It's not possible. The way that it's structured, the way it's traditionally been done, and the way that people are digging in their heels, it's not going to get done that way. Just letting you know. You're better off contacting people on an individual basis. I get encouraged when I see something like William Huckabee and Gary Lamb talked on the phone. I think that that's a much better way to go, or messaging privately. People that know me will tell you, and that have had contact with me before will tell you, you're much more likely for me to contact you via message or text or phone call than to post a comment on something on Facebook because find it really problematic. Even if, or especially, I disagree with you, or I think that you need to be informed about something, or if I have a question about something, I will just contact you and message you directly. I think almost everybody in Georgia wrestling of note will attest to that. And if I haven't done that, it's probably because I think I'm just not interested in talking to you. Because I feel like whatever relationship you're trying to have with me publicly, it's manipulative in nature, and it's not really about learning anything or teaching anything. It's just about getting yourself over, and frankly, I don't have the time or the energy. With that said, um, I want to talk about overcorrection really quickly. Who's this, Veronica?
Chase, the police dog from Paw Patrol. It was one of my guilty pleasures when I was a child. Definitely when I was a young child, not right now.
Definitely when you were a young child, not right now. So you don't watch Paw Patrol right now?
Nope.
So if I put on Paw Patrol right now, you'd be like, Dad, turn this off.
Yes.
You were asking about lie tells before. That was kind of a lie tell. You might watch it, right? Anyway, what do you think? I'll just ask you, Veronica. What do you think about Chase? Be honest. You like Chase?
Mhm.
What about in light of everything going on with Black Lives Matter and the police and all of that? Do you think that they should take Chase off of the air?
No, kids don't understand this. If I was an adult, so I'd be like, but it's a kid's show. It's a kid's show. Gosh dang it! And definitely for little kids, not me.
What do you think?
Well, I think it
Speak
might
up.
be the right move, because in light of everything, the police force has not been doing well, and I don't think they want to represent a group that could do, I guess that stands for some horrible things, and I don't think they want to sort of implant any ideas to children. So by taking them off the air, they're sort of backing off from getting any backlash politically from parents, I guess,
Cowards.
about Chase on the air.
Why? How are my two children able to have cognizant, well thought out, and I just sprung this on them. I didn't give them time to prep for this at all. And those are the answers that you get. Two completely different answers, but also articulated intelligently. This is something I have not seen online at all from the pro chasers or otherwise. What do I think? I think we are in a classic overcorrection, and overcorrections are an inevitable part of change. Pendulum swings, right? And they are inevitable, and they will always happen. That's hard for people to wrap their minds around. If you love Donald Trump, guess what? Even in your best case scenario, Donald Trump gets reelected in November. We get 4 more years of it. But you know what's going to have to happen after that? The chances that you're going to get Mike Pence as your president after 4 more years of Trump is virtually non-existent. At some point, the pendulum is going to swing back. In many ways, culturally, the pendulum swung where people who did not have a prominent voice in the culture had one again, meaning white, Midwestern Americans who had been pushed out a lot of the cultural dialogue, all of a sudden had a voice again. And their voices tended to take the extreme end. Yeah. Because again, that's what happens when the pendulum swings. It swings back. To me, if it's true that they're going to take Chase off of Paw Patrol stuff, is that a good thing? No. It is an overcorrection based on a lot of the principles that you talked about. That's why I'm so glad you said it the way that you said it. Is you can understand why it happens. And the fact is, neither side does a good enough job understanding the other side. Because the discourse takes place in packs of piranhas, looking for a bleeding cow on which to chew. The reason that it's so problematic. So, yeah, they're not going to show cops anymore, right? Is that a problem? On one hand, it is, because the reason that they're not going to show cops or live PD anymore are because it's a response to the negative things going on about the police and all the rest of it. I get that. But let's be realistic about other aspects of it too, on the nuance. Do you really care that they're going to cancel Cops because it was your favorite show? No. I would venture to guess that there was a bunch of people who certainly did not even know it was on the air anymore. And even more, that would be shocked to know how long that show has been on the air, in excess of 20 years.
No,
Holy crap.
That's like
Shows
6
generally don't last that long. And it's a miracle that it's still around. And Live PD is another show where it was like, I mean, I looked up the ratings of that show. Nobody's watching that show, right? Paw Patrol, though,
4-year-olds
a
unite.
totally different thing. I found this little guy when I was on a mystery shopper job in a Target. And I was just like, let me go look in the toy section, because I was looking for fighting equipment for these guys. By the way, just like in the same way that you can't find any weightlifting equipment or kettlebells and that kind of thing, they're sold out everywhere. So are any kind of martial art things. Boxing gloves, punching bags. I wanted to get like a pad for them to hit. Can't find any of it. So people hopefully are buying all this stuff and using it in their homes. One of the few positive side effects of COVID is hopefully people are working out more in their own homes. That's great. But I went to the toy section hoping amongst hopes to find some kind of martial art equipment for the girls. And what I found was a whole section dedicated to Paw Patrol.
Paw Patrol. I forgot.
And I looked at this guy and I just went, let me get this, because I think it's just a powerful visual, right? In the eyes of some people, it's a cute, Jesus cute. And it's cool. And he's, and he's got the cop uniform, and it makes sense because he represents, we're supposed to like the police, and it's a great way to get us to trust the police. And in this one's mind, right? Right now, she wouldn't put it like this, but we're deconstructing the idea of the police, right? It's always been, the police will always help, the police are always great, the police are always on your side, and now we're having to reevaluate that. And what is that making people feel? Fear. Fear that things are changing. Fear that what you've always been taught is not the truth. And fear that it's, even if it's true for you, it's not true for everybody, and that means it's got to change. Fear. Dave Chappelle said something else in his special, which I thought was incredibly powerful. Everyone lies. All institutions, politicians, even the places and the institutions that you trust the most, on some way, shape, or form, they are lying to you. That's church leaders. That's political leaders. In many cases, it's your parents. And it is our job to do two things: to communicate in ways that are effective. And no, I don't think Facebook is that way by itself. But it's to talk to people, and it's to gain empathy for them. I'm going to look at Paul Lee stuff now. Paul Lee, which who we've made fun of many times in the past. Most certainly.
Who wants to be a bajillionaire, guys?
Let's look at a number of who wants to be a bajillionaire. Let's look at a number of different things. So first, there's this,
This
right? History, not hate. Flags matter too. Grow up, USA. America, wake up. This has gone on long enough. Race war isn't what's good for our country. It's time to end this now. So I put that up. And that's, you could see how upset they're getting, right? Because for them, the Confederate flag, it's antiquated, it's embarrassing, that kind of thing. But I wanted to put up this as well. Because the sentiment, at least, is there's something pure about the sentiment. For the record, I have several black friends that, along with white friends, I would give you the shirt off my back. Color doesn't make your character, your actions do. We're all Americans. Let's act like it. No riots, no groups, no hate, just Americans. The sentiment is there. However, of course, it all works if none of us parcel off into groups when the system works towards your advantage. And that, of course, means you have to acknowledge the fact that the system works in some way, shape, or form towards your advantage in an unfair way to others. And to acknowledge that requires people to overcome fear. And I can be empathetic towards that. I can understand how that would be difficult. It is difficult for me as well. But here's where I have the big problem. Here's another Polly post. All NASCAR drivers need to aim for Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is one of the people who was the first to call for the removal of the Confederate flags from NASCAR. All NASCAR drivers need to aim for Bubba Wallace's car at the next race. If you want to act stupid, make him look stupid.
Wait, what?
So in other words, he's telling other drivers to attack Bubba Wallace for being against the Confederate flag. So how can you have the sentiment of we all need to come together, we need to quit, blah, 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 but then all of your rhetoric is divisive? Let us punish this person who's saying this thing that I don't agree with as harshly as possible. This is going to require a lot of soul searching. And it's going to require a lot of soul searching from people. The sad thing is, the people who need to do the soul searching the most are our leaders, especially in the Georgia wrestling community. And I'm going to be blunt. I feel as if many of the people who have leadership roles or who have taken leadership roles in Georgia wrestling, by and large, are coming across as bullies, blowhards, and are buying into their own bullshit acts and not evaluating self enough. And for those of you who, for instance, like Paul Lee and want to mock him, who want to piranha up on that bleeding cow of a man, and I certainly get the instinct. How many of you actually would, if you had a Venn diagram of you and your beliefs and thoughts about things and Paul Lee's, those circles would virtually overlap. In fact, the people that I know who hate Paul Lee the most probably agree with him on 99% of what he thinks. Perhaps you differ in degrees of intensity about that belief, but you certainly have more in common with Paul Lee than you would somebody like me, who you tend to like more or agree with more, right? On the surface. But deep down, you're really a couple of degrees off from Paul Lee, even as you hate him. It's interesting. Look, people are afraid, and people need leaders. And I've been pretty vocal about the fact that I think most of the people who are the loudest voices in the room right now, particularly in Georgia wrestling, are misguided. And this is on all sides of the political spectrum. I do think the answer is more introspection. I think the answer is more acknowledging faults and mistakes as you continue to sally forth. But I am not a fan of the lack of flexibility. I am not a fan of the lack of knowledge. I am not a fan of the idea that festooning yourselves in the guts of your enemies counts as nobility. And what I mean is, we all agree that there are people that have beliefs that I would consider backwards as far as race, as far as all of these other things. And the fact that so many people with the all lives matter feel the need to be so vocal tells me something. And it doesn't just tell me they're racists and they need to be dismissed out of hand. What it tells me is they're dealing with fear. And they're acting out of fear. So am I saying, oh, well then Steve, you're saying what they're saying is right or justified? I'm just telling you what is. What I see on this side is fear. What I see on this side is fear. But for the first time in a long time, the fear on the Black Lives Matter side is now getting a chance to change to something else. But it was fear. And those early protests were fear. And the early riots were fear. Is it cool that people's property got destroyed? No. Do I completely understand why it happened? Yes. But that understanding doesn't mean it was justified completely. What it means is it was an inevitable result. That's what happens when people are afraid. And on this side, all the nonsense that I had to read about, like, if people show up, if any of these protesters show up near me, I got a gun. Or this town is armed and full of rednecks and we'll shoot anybody that comes and tries to destroy our town. Fear, 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 fear. And the way that both sides wallowed in it was troubling. This side, thankfully, appears as if they're getting out of that. They're rejecting that violent impulse. And now the call is to make something happen that is progressive, that will help. And my hope is this side, it's not a zero-sum game, but let's face it, things are going to be lost. Statues are coming down. Confederate flags are going away, by and large, publicly. It's happening. Just like I said about COVID, right? It doesn't matter what the reality is. The true reality is that people are exhausted and that Georgia wrestling shows, didn't I say that a week ago? The shows are going to open up regardless. I don't care what regulations they think they're putting in place. At this point, people are too exhausted and we're just going to open up. That's what's going to happen, and that's what is happening. Make no mistake about it. And it doesn't matter how many more cases erupt, and the cases are already going up. They are. And it doesn't matter if people continue to die. The numbers will always be explained away. We are not going to go on lockdown again, almost no matter what happens. That's a reality. So instead of me discussing the merits of whatever, I just prefer to put out the reality. And then here's the other part of the reality. This is a sea change that is really taking place. And you can mourn for the loss of a Confederate flag, or you can understand why it's happening. And maybe you can be a little honest with yourself. If this flag represents a horror to an entire group of people, Can't I be, on some level, sympathetic towards that? And you say, but what you really want is to be heard too. Can't they understand that that's an important part of my heritage? Can't they understand? Yeah. But right now, the voice that's heard, the voice that's being heard, is the voice that's needed to be heard for decades, hundreds of years, and hasn't been. And as always, instead of communicating these things in the chicken shit way of Facebook, you can always talk to people on an individual basis. It's direct messages. And another thing that I hope is that as things begin to level out, is that both sides lose this piranha pack mentality of looking for the next bleeding cow to feed on. Because that mentality is not born out of something pure. It's not born out of a righteous instinct, though sometimes those things happen to take place together. It's born out of fear. Here's someone we can pile on. Let's pile on together. And no matter how you feel about the thing being piled on at that moment, that instinct, the very instinct of wanting to gang up and destroy the one thing, if that becomes your sole medium on which to solve problems, at least in your own mind, it's a very dangerous game. All the things you hate and the institutions you hate were born out of this mentality. All of them. Sometimes that works out for the good, but more often than not, what ends up happening is the death. The death of the temporarily unpopular idea, the death of the new way of thinking, the death of those that are different or make us uncomfortable. I'm going to upload this video. Then we're going to take a little trip to go see the Pulse nightclub because I feel like they're old enough. We've already had a talk about it. And I would imagine that we'll drive by a protest or two and see. Because of COVID, I don't feel comfortable for them participating in any of these things directly. Boy, what a time. Yeah. And now to bring it back to Georgia wrestling really quick. As things open up and shows happen at an increasing rate, I have no doubt a lot of the old pettiness will resume. And in a weird way, that's healthy. It's sort of an indication of like, okay, we're feeling more normal. Now we can debate on so and so and such and all of that stuff, and which promoters are doing the best job promoting, and all of that stuff, which seems so stupid and trivial right now, does it not? But this is also a chance to reinvent. I've been encouraged and bolstered by things as far-ranging as David Ali's videos, to Gunnar Miller's open declaration of like, I could have handled these things better for this past year, to something as simple as Gary Lamb and William Huckabee having conversations. Now, I think that they belittle them by going like, "Ooh, we're planning stuff," but I get it. They're wrestling people; they can't help but do it that way. I certainly am interested in whatever the product is that they produce together, whatever form that takes. And I'm always going to be still out here going, we need to question, we need to push. That's the way it should be. But take care of yourselves. Think about things. and find the best way to use your time and resources, um, and the people around you, both the ones that you love and care about and the ones that you feel the need to chew up like piranha on a bleeding cow. Decide where your time is best spent, and understand that all revolutions and all changes, because that's what revolutions really are, they're about changes, in most cases, fundamental changes. Part of change is transition from doing one thing and then doing something that's more important. Protests start off, there's going to be a violent, riotous element to them, but that can't last, nor should it. If it doesn't ultimately change things structurally, then it's a failure. And so are you as a person if you don't continue to improve and better the world around you. So change. This has been Full Disclosure.
X.